And our third main topic today. Oh, and before we get to our third main topic, I just want to shout out to that Rory Goodwidge sends in a super chat badge in the live chat. Thank you, Rory. Appreciate that very much. All right, let's get on to main topic number 3. And our third main topic today gets submitted to us by Slim Kim. And Slim Kim writes, "Hey, John, love the show. Thank you so much, Slim Kim. So I know you think Spider-Man is going to leave the MCU after No Way Home. Yes, I do. But Kevin Feige was just interviewed via the Direct. I think he was actually interviewed by Empire. But anyway, via the Direct, talking about Spider-Man. And when they asked him if he was leaving, he said he doesn't anticipate putting the fans through that again. What do you think of it? Thanks." All right. Thanks a lot for sending that in, man. And yes, one of the big topics of conversation around here recently has been like, what's going to be happening here to Spider-Man, especially with No Way Home coming out. What's going to be happening? What's the future of Spider-Man? We know the existing Sony and Marvel deal is coming to an end. Are they going to re-up it? That's a possibility. Are they going to extend it further? Possibly. Could they intercross the movie universes a little bit more? That's a possibility, especially if you've seen Venom Let There Be Carnage. That's definitely a possibility. Or is it what I think it is, that this is setting up, ushering Spider-Man back over to Sony? Which I have no insider information. I've never had any insider information telling me that's the case. That's just kind of always what I have thought and speculated, looking at the information that we have in front of us and seeing how they've been looking and approaching Spider-Man to this point. And then you see Venom Let There Be Carnage, and that only reinforces the idea that we're probably going to see Spider-Man go back over to Sony and all that kind of stuff. Now, with all that being said, for the first time really in a long time, Kevin Feige has decided to address the issue. And the comment that everybody is quoting right now is a little bit out of context, but it still makes his point. This is when kind of talking about the Spider-Man situation, the deal between Sony and Marvel. Here's what Kevin Feige said. He said, "I don't anticipate us going through that emotional roller coaster or putting fans through that emotional roller coaster again." And again, that comes to us from Kevin Feige. Now, what a lot of people are doing is they're taking those words and interpreting it as Kevin Feige is saying Spider-Man is staying in the MCU. That's how they're taking and interpreting. And that is a valid interpretation. You don't have to be stretching super far to interpret his words that way. It's a valid interpretation and could very well be what it is he's saying. Could be. But when you look at the whole thing of what he was talking about in context, there might actually be another very valid interpretation of what he was saying. Because in this interview, he was talking a lot about, about the whole emotional roller coaster that went through back in 2018, 2019, when Sony and Marvel decided to end the relationship with Spider-Man. It was very abrupt. Like, Spider-Man's in the MCU. Now he's not in the MCU. Oh, wait, now they made another deal. Now he's back. It was very abrupt. It was out of nowhere. I remember at D23, there's a lot of people talking about it. Kevin Feige also said, "I was mentally preparing to emotionally separate from Spider-Man. I didn't love it, but it is what it is." And then, thankfully, it came back together. And then talking about all this kind of stuff about how passionate he was, all this kind of things. And then ultimately comes the comment of, "I don't anticipate," let's read this whole thing. This is from the Direct, who says, "Feige then expressed his optimism for the future of Spider-Man in the MCU, saying that he doubts fans will have to experience that emotional roller coaster. I don't anticipate us going through that emotional roller coaster or putting fans through that emotional roller coaster again." So what does that mean? I get it that some people want that to mean Kevin Feige just said Spider-Man is staying in the MCU. And I don't think that's what he means. At least, not entirely. You guys might remember, because again, Kevin Feige was talking about that whole roller coaster about, like, hey, Spider-Man's in the MCU, everything's fine. And then out of nowhere comes news, Sony and Marvel ending their deal, boom. And then all of a sudden, oh no, we renewed the thing. And he's talking about this thing. All Feige is saying, I don't expect we're going to put audiences through an emotional roller coaster again. To me, that lines up with my theory, and it's just a theory, that Spider-Man No Way Home is going to be a big setup to properly exit Spider-Man out of the MCU without some abrupt a news drop out of nowhere saying, oh, by the way, the Sony's Marvel deal is done. I think they're going to set it up with a nice, smooth transition, make it work narratively, and it won't be this emotional roller coaster. But there's something else important that we need to remember and keep in mind. You guys maybe remember about 2 weeks ago, we were talking about the Spider-Man situation on this show. And one of the things that I said in regards to the Spider-Man situation is, let's not forget, it's also possible that when Spidey goes back over to Sony, that doesn't have to be a finality. Like, we could theoretically see Spider-Man still pop up once in a while in the MCU. You guys remember us talking about that. Well, let's go back a couple of years ago. Let's go back 2 years and hear something that Kevin Feige said after they announced that Marvel and Sony have extended their deal. Remember, because they had said they had ended it back in 2018, 2019, and then came the news that they decided to extend the deal. Let's go back and look at the words of Kevin Feige back in 2019 when that happened. Kevin Feige said this. This is back, I believe, in 2019, after they announced that they extended the deal. Kevin Feige said this: I am thrilled that Spidey's journey in the MCU will continue. And I and a lot of us at Marvel Studios are very excited that we get to keep working on it. Kevin Feige said in a statement, Spider-Man is a powerful icon and hero whose story crosses all ages and audiences around the globe. He also happens to be the only hero with the superpower to cross cinematic universes. So as Sony continues to develop their own Spideyverse, you never know what surprises the future might hold. Again, let's look at that last part. He also happens to be, Spider-Man, also happens to be the only hero with the superpower to cross cinematic universes. So as Sony continues to develop their own Spideyverse, you never know what surprises the future might hold. Let that sink in for a second. Again, this was back in 2019. Now, remember what I was talking about a couple of weeks ago. I said, yeah, I think Spidey's going back over to Sony, but that doesn't mean he can't maybe still pop up in the MCU now and again. And again, if you've seen the end of Venom, Let There Be Carnage, you know that I think that reinforces the idea that Spider-Man's come back over to Sony. So when you look at Kevin Feige's new statement, the thing he just said, I don't anticipate us going through that emotional roller coaster or putting fans through that emotional roller coaster again. And then you look back on what he said in 2019, saying, hey, Sony's developing their Spider-Verse and Spider-Man is the only character who can cross cinematic universes. To me, I think the painting is becoming a little more clear. Sony is taking Spider-Man back. I think Sony is going to make Spider-Man movies moving forward. But I think he will, from time to time, still pop up in the MCU. Maybe not in standalone Spider-Man films. I think Sony is taking those back. Again, we're all just I'm just making fan speculation based on what we've seen and based on what we know and based on what we heard. And it sounds to me like, yeah, Sony's taking Spider-Man back, but he will still pop up now and again in the MCU. That's what I'm starting to think is really coming. And again, let's go back one more time. Let's take a look back to 2019. Kevin Feige said, Spider-Man also happens to be the only hero with the superpower to cross cinematic universes. So that's kind of hinting he can go back and forth. So as Sony continues to develop their own Spideyverse, notice Kevin Feige didn't say Sony continues to develop their own movie universe. No, he specifically called it a Spideyverse. You never know what surprises the future might hold. By the way, I just want to shout out Chris Leonardo in the super chat, in the chat section there. Just sent in a $20 super chat badge. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that, man. Anyway, Yeah, so look, if you think that's reaching, then you're not reading. Kevin Feige directly said Spider-Man as a character is going to be able to go back and forth between cinematic universes. What do you think that means? Like, okay, you don't think that means Spidey is going to go back and forth between cinematic universes. Okay, then what did Kevin Feige mean when he said Spider-Man can go back and forth between cinematic universes? What the fuck, you think he's talking about making Starbucks runs? Do you think he's talking about going to get his nails done? Going to get his hair did? Do you think when he's talking about crossing cinematic universe, he's going to some massage parlor, get a little happy ending? You think is that the euphemism for crossing cinematic universes? Where are you going, honey? Nowhere, dear. I'm just going to go cross cinematic universes. Sorry. Anyway, yes. So that's my question. Well, what do you think about that? I personally, again, I think this all just affirms again my guess, pure speculation, that yes, Spider-Man No Way Home is setting up the exit of Spider-Man out of the MCU and back over to Sony proper. I think this new comment by Kevin Feige kind of backs that up. I think when you compare that and overlap that with Kevin Feige's 2019 statement saying, yeah, Sony's continuing to develop their Spider-Verse and Spider-Man's going to be able to travel back and forth between cinematic universes. Very big surprises coming. I personally think it's becoming more clear. And I really don't, I don't think that's a stretch at all. If you read Kevin Feige's statement, it's not a stretch. Unless you have some kind of different interpretation from Spidey has the ability to cross cinematic universes. But anyway, again, we're all just speculating. It's just a lot of fun. And again, let me say this. I don't think you're crazy. I don't think you're crazy at all if you think Spider-Man is just flat out staying in the MCU. I don't think you're crazy. I think there are some legitimate reasons there to believe that. I'm not going to fall out of my seat with shock and surprise if that's what happens. But again, I'm just saying right now, it looks to me like that's the way it's all heading. And when you look at Kevin Feige's current statements and his older statements, it seems to be going that way. So I don't know. Question is, what do you guys make of all this? Are you like, oh my God, you're right, this is what he's been saying and doing, blah, blah. Or do you think, no, man, he's just going back to Sony, period, and he's not going to be popping up in the MCU? Or it's like, no, man, he's just staying in the MCU and he's not going to be popping up in the Sony universe. Whatever you guys think right now, and we're getting closer to No Way Home, we're going to find out really soon, but it's still fun to speculate and guess. How are you guys thinking about this? Jump down into the comment section below and let us know your thoughts.